round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
You will notice that by an absolutely unrehearsed fluke, Sue and I not only are dressed complementarily, but we match the book cover. How cool is that?
And Joan brought a picture from my signing for V.S. for Vengeance, same earrings. So my daughter was looking at pictures posted for V.S. for Vengeance. She said, "Mother, you're wearing the same outfit in every picture." I'm going, I take one on the road. If you spill on me, I am in so much trouble. So try not to do that.
I'm going to email you before W. And we'll decide on some other scheme, maybe purple or royal blue or something like that. Kinsey and Me is the book that Sue and her husband, Steve Humphrey, who is an absolute sweetheart, and I wish he's teaching tonight. Is that why he didn't come?
Tuesday and Thursday.
Oh.
He's teaching philosophy of quantum mechanics. So if any of you have a little something to contribute, I can take it back to him.
I'm losing my... Oh, anyway, the two of them published Kinsey and Me, the original version, about, 20 years ago?
1991.
1991, and they printed it privately, so there were how many copies?
300 numbered copies and 26 lettered copies. Is that amazing?
Woohoo! We actually have one here at the Poison Pen, somewhere secreted away. But it's available for sale unless somebody's already bought it, so you can check with our staff afterward. So my question is this the same book, or have, in the passage since 1991, have you done something to it so it's actually a different book?
The new Kinsey Millhone story is one I was asked to write for the Land's End 40th anniversary catalog. Now, I am very hard to please. I don't say yes to many things, because I operate out of shadow. I don't know if y'all are Jungians, but my secret self gets to vote first. So I get this call on shadows going, "That's funny, let's do that." So I looked through my Land's End catalog and came across the Squall Parka, and I thought, I'm going to write a story about Kinsey Millhone in that Squall Parka. Now, I personally felt they should have sent me one, but they did not. So if anybody out there is from Land's End, I'm open for business here. I also, from the original, I pulled 2 short stories that I did because I did, and added 5 that have never been published before. And I believe those were rearranged so that you can see a sort of shadowy narrative that moves toward a resolution. The stories at the end of the book are very difficult. You know, a woman on Facebook said, "I really liked the front end. I didn't like those other stories at all." And I said, that's okay. You know, not everybody wants intimacy. Not everybody wants your personal story. But to me, I thought what was interesting was the connection and the contrast between Kinsey Millhone, who is my public self, and Kit Blue, who is an old version of me. So I thought it would give you a glimpse into my dark childhood, which I did survive, please. There are people out there in the audience tonight I know who went through difficult times, and I don't think it has to mark you. I don't think it has to make you unpleasant. I think you can take your chaos and turn it into something better. So I'm just here to tell you I came through it okay, and so can you, and I know some of you have done it, so we'll have those chats later.
You know, that's so Dickens. I always think about that when I read Oliver Twist, who Oliver Twist could really have just gone like right down a London sewer, right? But not Oliver Twist. He kept going through it, and there is a big nature-nurture argument, you know, but I think a lot of it just comes down to personality and character, you know. Some people are swamped by adversity, and some people triumph.
Well, I think we are born with our natures. I mean, I've watched my children and my granddaughters. Some are just sunny people. They come into the world. I was one. I'm little Miss Mary Sunshine, you know, and that's a gift. That's not anything I have any control over. I'm an optimistic person. I'm good-natured in the main. And
not always.
Not always. I do have my moments, but I'm getting better. Because what I've learned is if you live out a shadow, it makes life so much easier. You just say, no, don't want to, and that's the end of that argument. Nobody puts anything over on me. It's just like, I don't want to. So I just give you that free of charge. This is thousands of dollars worth of therapy I am passing on to you at no charge whatever.
I always find it kind of funny because Sue and I are alike. Not only are we the same age, but we're alike in a lot of ways, which is both of us find that being charming in public for hours is a real strain. We're both really very private people. She writes, I read and whatever, and then we come out, right? And then we do something like this, and everybody thinks we're so social and fabulous, and then we're not. But here we are. We did take a little break over there at Grazie for a glass of wine apiece, which is a very important part of taking care of authors before they come to do events. It's one of my jobs. We're going to talk a little bit, I think, about this book is the Kinsey part, which is short stories about Kinsey, and the me part, which is about Kit. And I did a little research today because I wasn't sure that my memory was going to be up to it. Have you noticed that it's harder to remember?
It depends on what you're talking. Some things I remember,
Well, I don't trust mine anymore, so I actually wrote it down. Sue wrote these stories, the Kinsey stories anyway, according to what's in the book, and you can contradict it, from 1986 to 93. And the Private Eye Association of America, PWA, instituted something called the Sheamus Awards in, I think, 1983. That's the way, well,
yeah,
I can remember that because I looked it up today. But in any case, it looks like 1983. And A is for Alibi was a nomination from the Private Eye Association for Best First Novel in 1983.
And I lost. Am I bitter? No. I'm not that bitter.
You can afford to be generous because the next year or the next time B came out, B was nominated and won. And then C was nominated and lost. Sad. But G was nominated and won, and then K was nominated and won. But what I was interested in, that was sort of just by the way of looking up the short stories, because 4 of Sue's short stories were all nominated for Best Short Story of the Year. Between the Sheets was the first one in I can't read this, 87, I think it was. Then The Poison That Leaves No Trace in 91, Full Circle in 92, and A Little Missionary Work. I love that title. I'm not sure if that refers to a position or whether it refers to, what does it refer to? A little missionary work.
It refers to the little kindnesses you do, because in life we all have to do a little missionary work, and they're just things you do because that's the proper thing to do.
So in 1993, when you won that, E.L. James hadn't written 50 Shades of Grey, and we wouldn't actually even be thinking in terms of missionary position, would we? Anyhow, in 2003, Sue was awarded the Eye, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Private Eye of America. So you can see that she's had a very successful career with short stories, 4 nominations versus 5 for the novels from this association. And I looked at that one because you have been writing in the Private Eye field all this time.
Yes, I have.
Except for Keziah Dane, and weren't there?
Keziah Dane came out in 1967, and The Lolly Madonna War, which is published in England in 1969. I started doing mainstream fiction. And I had a very brief and non-illustrious career. I was not meant for mainstream fiction because I never planned in advance. I would just put a piece of typewriter in my paper, machine, and just start typing. And when I saw what happened on page 1, I'd put in the next page and see what happened there. This is not really what I recommend. I once wrote a novel that was 15 pages long about a boy who ran with a pack of wild dogs. Now, maybe I could sell it now. I ought to try to do that when I get to the end of Z is for Zero. But oh, that one I'll tell you. That one I'll tell you.
Z is for Zero, in case you missed it, everybody. Zero.
Right. But the second novel that was published, which was The Lolly Madonna War, sold to Hollywood. I went there and learned to do screenplay form and worked there for 15 years. And it was not good for me. I was not, it was glamorous in the beginning. I loved it. There was just something heady about it. However, I am not a team player. I don't like to do work by committee. Especially at a certain point, they were all 26 years old, and none of them had written anything. They were telling me how to do my business, and I was very unpleasant. After a while, I thought, I don't even like myself anymore. I thought I was making good money, and here is the best part of this story. I stayed in Hollywood as long as I did, the most fabulous medical insurance on the planet. See, and so I kept thinking, if I just write one more script, I can keep my insurance. At a certain point, this little voice spoke up, it's probably Shadow, and said, "You're an insurance slut. Pay the $3,500 a year and get the hell out of this town." So, fade out, fade in, as we say in the film biz. A couple of years ago, I went to check and see if I qualified for lifetime insurance, you know, what you do when you get as old as me. And it required 68 quarters of work in Hollywood. I had 72. So I now have this fabulous insurance. And I'm not even sure, I also have Medicare. Isn't that fun? So I got to check out. I don't even know what my benefits are, but they're just, they're incredible. So, you know, all those years of lying on my back paid off. At any rate, eventually, I wrote A is for Alibi as my way out. It was like digging under a prison wall with a teaspoon. But, you know, I knew I needed to get back to solo writing before they just ruined me, you know. I got to a point where I didn't care about the work, because anything I did that I cared about, they would change. So I got lazy. It's like, I'll just see what the producer wants. You know, I didn't struggle for the perfect word, because what was the point? And that's how I knew I was on that downward spiral. So I thought, I will get back to solo writing, and I've told this story before, so if you've heard it, try to be polite. There was an agent in Hollywood who said to me, "You have a reputation for being able to write character, but you cannot do plot." And I went, that pissed me off so bad. So I thought to myself, I will teach myself how to plot. And what better way to do it than the mystery novel? So I just set about, I learned police procedure, private eye procedure, ballistics, California criminal law. I taught myself all this stuff. And then I went through all these how-to books about the mystery novel, because you know my father wrote mystery novels back in the 40s. And I came up with A is for Alibi, which I sold on the basis of 65 pages, and here I am. And now, see, when Hollywood comes sniffing around my door, I'm so gracious. Here's what I say. I would rather roll naked in broken glass than sell you this character. Sometimes I say, I would rather have a root canal than sell you this character. I will not do business with those people. And they're lovely and they're smart, and they give you often a cup of coffee before they trash your work. So I'm not up for that anymore.
You said that you sold A is for Alibi on the basis of 65 pages, and then you realized to your horror when they paid you, you actually had to write the book?
No, yes.
Really bad news there.
I got $10,000 for that, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. The first novel I had published, Keziah Dane, I got $1,500. I was really excited about that. And in truth, it did make a huge difference in my life. So it isn't about the money for a while, but finally it's about the money, you know.
But the reason I asked is that if you hadn't written anything before, it would have been a lot higher mountain to climb from 65 pages to the end, but you'd already done that.
Well, and, you know, life is just preparing you for more of the life if you live long enough. What I went through as a child, what I went through in my early career, what I went through in Hollywood was all training me for the job I now do. Little did I know, I was born to write detective novels. It just took me a while to discover, to find my place. And now my object in life is to get to Z is for zero without repeating myself, without cheating, without faking, and without taking shortcuts. And I promise you I will do it, or die trying. But I really don't want to die, so thank you.
When you started out calling it A is for Alibi, did you actually envision going all the way to Z, or was it just sort of a way to get started?
No, yes, I thought I would write a crime novel for every letter of the alphabet. Looking back, it seems cheeky. It seems outrageously nervy, having never done one, and besides which, having sold A, who knew that anybody would want B as for burglar? But life is about taking chances and about taking risk, and what's the worst thing that could have happened? I'd have failed with $10,000 in my pocket. See, that's not bad. So,
talk to me a little bit about the difference between writing a novel and a short story.
A short story is like a one-line joke, and I will write a short story if that little quick thought comes to me. If I thought you hadn't read these stories, I'd tell you some. You know, I read the paper, and sometimes just this wonderful little idea pops up. And with a short story, it is an idea that's slight and complete in itself, and it's one I know I cannot expand into the length of a novel. The idea for a short story does not have weight or complexity. It's just a little jewel. And the fun of it is that within that tiny framework, you still need beginning, middle, and end. You still need a setup that's not immediately obvious to a reader, and you need some suggestion that there are suspects. So that's a lot to accomplish in 20 pages while giving the illusion that you have all the time in the world. So one of the reasons I don't write short stories much anymore is they don't occur to me. You know, if one occurred to me, I would write it.
I wondered if you'd stopped in '93 because the novels had sort of taken over your life. They'd gotten bigger and you had deadlines and you just didn't have time.
Partly. Part of it is those ideas just haven't crossed my plate, you know. It's like I once in a while write poetry. And that is not anything you can calculate. You can't say, I'm going to sit down and write a really meaningful poem. Doesn't happen. You know, either a poem comes to you intact or it does not. So most of what I do now is devote the energy to the books, because that's my focus. That's what my life is about.
Seemed to me you let a lot of humor into or maybe they were funny situations or something, but the short stories, for those of you who have read them or haven't read them, I think are really very, very funny. And sometimes in the books, Kinsey, you know, it's a darker world there, right?
Yes.
So do you find that's true, that in a short story you can often kind of...
It's possible. Again, it may be because the impetus for a short story is kind of a quick comment in itself, and either they occur to me as a sort of wry observation, or, for instance, I can't tell you how I got an inspiration for one, because if you haven't read it, you'll know how it turns out, and that's no fun. Later, when you've read these stories, we'll have another meeting, and I'll tell you how they came to pass.
So when you come back for W, somebody will remind me. We will ask Sue that very question, because by then, theoretically, you will have taken Kinsey and Me home and actually read it, right? That would be good. How many short stories have you written that are not in Kinsey and Me?
None that I know.
I thought you said you'd taken a couple out.
Oh, those were the short personal pieces.
Oh, I'm sorry. Those were the Kid Blue stories.
Right.
Oh, beg your pardon.
Right. Those are not short stories per se.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
So this is your complete short story work in this volume.
Yeah, adding my Land's End.
I love that. And one of them was published in Red Book. Do any of you remember Red Book, you know, which was a magazine? It was primarily women's fiction, I think, wasn't it? And that's been an interesting development with the internet and digital publishing for a long time. Well, not a long time, but for part of the time, because I started this store in 1989, and there was a a period from there to here where there really wasn't any place to publish short stories because most magazines had gone defunct and all. But thanks to digital publishing, authors who like short stories can publish them on their websites, can do a lot of things. And I think the internet's giving a rebirth to the short story in the way that, you know, the old Pulp Fiction or the old, like, women's, what was it, the Ladies' Home Journal?
Yeah,
Wasn't that
I
another
think
one?
it's still in business.
There were stories in 17. And do you know where a place, I always find this funny, but a lot of really award-winning crime fiction was published in Playboy.
Right.
I remember going to a party in New York where Larry Block plucked me off the street. And he said, Don Westlake is getting, you know, an award from Playboy for his work. Why don't you come with me? We'll go up to the penthouse. And I'm going, I didn't know Larry that well. I thought, maybe this is just, this is an abduction attempt or something, you know. I mean, how reasonable was it that we were going up to a Playboy penthouse to get a book award? But in fact, it was true. They did, and they actually commissioned some, I think.
Yeah.
So there you go. So maybe now, if one occurs to you, you can always pop it off on Facebook or your website or something, right?
Perhaps.
You really like Facebook, don't you?
I do. Do you all get on Facebook and come visit me? Now, I will tell you, and SueGrafton.com is just boring. It's just boring. I always forget to update it, and when you get on there, I can never remember my name and my code word, but Facebook is so much fun. So and when I heard about it, it's like, I'm not doing Facebook. I don't have that kind of time. I am on there every morning, and it takes me about 15 minutes. I talk to everybody who talks to me, and it's just great fun. So if you get on there, we can just have a chat, as long as you're reasonably polite. You can be candid, but I'm not going to put up with any nastiness, I'll tell you that right now. I got ways to get even with you, so be nice.
I'm going to disagree with her slightly because I went to SueGrafton.com today just to kind of check a few things out, and there are two things I can recommend to you. There are photographs of Sue when she was an adorable baby, and the thing that depressed me is there are photographs of her office. She has 25 immaculate feet desk work where she can, and I looked at my office, which actually also has about 25 feet, and it's totally trashed at all times. And I thought, this is a standard I cannot live up to. I was intimidated. Did you clean it up for those photographs?
No, see, I prefer being organized. The creative process is so sloppy and so disorganized that if I'm surrounded by disorder, it makes me frazzled. So I am actually in a new office because we built another house 2.5 years ago. We were so clever. Just as the market crashed, we built this house, and now we own 3. It was so exciting. We just had this sort of intuition. But in my new office, I always believed I would be happier if everything was orderly and neat. I thought, I'm going to do it. So I redid 500 files, and they're color coordinated. And I did all the labels on the computer, and they are so gorgeous. And so I can open my file drawer. I have hundreds of files, newspaper clippings, and all manner of things. And I am happier. It makes me happy to open my file drawer. So my office will get untidy, but just yesterday I went back and got it all put together again. Now I'm happier.
Some people would think that you were just not wanting to write while you were doing all this busy work.
There is always that element, always work avoidance. Yeah. Even now, writing is a very frightening process. It's stressful. It's hard work. I work by trial and error, and after all these years, I still don't quite know what I'm doing. So I'm always reinventing the form, and I was telling somebody today, I did an interview over at Arizona State with a lovely man named Alberto Rios. And
you were doing Books and Company.
I did,
yes,
I did.
On our local PBS 8, in case you have a chance to watch it. Alberto Rios is a wonderful author in his own right. He's a wonderful writer.
Is he? Oh,
yes.
He said he was a poet.
He is, yeah, and gorgeous besides. Well, anyway.
But I was telling him, I keep a notebook, a journal for every novel I write. And the journal for V.S. for Vengeance was 964 single-spaced pages For W, I am already at 1,154 pages, and I've still got some of the book to go. But it is my process, and I don't know how writers work keeping it in their heads. Writing happens on the page, and so if you're interested in writing, you write what you want to write. So these journals of mine are like long, whiny letters to myself. Every day I talk to myself about what I'm doing, where I am in the book, what I'm worried about, what the possibilities are, how I might do this, that, and the other. And they're boring, they're endlessly repetitive, but they are not written for public consumption. I'm not trying to be clever or literary. I'm just there agonizing over what I'm doing. So I don't know how long the journal's going to be for Z at this rate. One day scholars will come in and, I'm going to put them straight to sleep. They're going to think they've got this wonderful source of their PhD. They're going to die when they read these things. Boring.
They're going to say, how come that woman sold any books?
I know.
Well, Kinsey was born on May 5th, 1950, which makes her 10 years younger than we are.
No, she's 38.
I meant at the outset.
At
the outset.
Right. When I started, she was 32, I was 42.
Right.
Now I'm 72.
Right.
So.
And so am I, as you've all worked out. Sue and I were born in 1940, and Kinsey was born in 1950. But by some miraculous process, Kinsey is now only 38. And here we are. However, the effect of that, and the reason I'm asking that, is that when you started out writing them, it was pretty much all contemporary. But now you're almost writing historical fiction. And so does it take more work to remember how it all was now in the late 1980s? It's not just happening around you.
Well, and part of it is language. Part of it is our sensibility, which has changed. Computers, that's a huge issue. In 1982, my husband and I got a computer that we had a network between us. We've worked in the same office. It cost $14,000. And that's what it cost at that time. When we went to sell it about 5 years later, we couldn't give it away. Now you can get a really handsome machine for $1,400, if you want to.
And not only that, with double capacity. We just changed the server at the bookstore, and it meant miraculously from 32 to 64. I can't remember what, because I don't do this. Well, I think it's something called BIT, but whatever it is, it's double the capacity, and it's only been like 3 years. It's really scary.
Well, do you remember when cell phones first came out? They were huge, and you had to wear this kind of pack on your back. Is that primitive? So I liked the world better back then, frankly. I thought it was friendlier.
Right. But it is more effort to write something back then, because now, you can't just go out your door and look around. You actually have to think about it.
Well, it helps that I don't understand computer stuff at all, so it's no loss to me. I don't get it. I don't get live stream. This is just a rumor as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, do you see that little camera over there?
Oh, no.
That's it. Going on. Well, I asked that question in part as a lead-in to the second part of the book, and since it's really very personal to Sue, and I have said, although she'll probably contradict me now that I've said this, because she can be pretty contrary, that this is going to be her basically as close to autobiography as she comes. If you publish a book later called The Real Sue Grafton, I'm going to beat you up. But I think it would be more appropriate if Sue talks to you about the and me part of this book in Kit Blue without me.
The stories in the back half of the book I wrote when I was 30. This was in the time just after my mother's death. She died on my 20th birthday. Now think about that. From a writer's perspective, what a metaphor that is. So for years I thought about what that meant. And I worried about the fact that every time I had a birthday, I would think about her death, but I've already forgotten that, So what I did as my way of processing rage and grief and all those unresolved issues, I sat at my typewriter and I just put it down on paper. And it came out in the purest form because I wasn't intellectualizing, I wasn't forming theories, I wasn't trying to make it look like anything other than it was. And so those stories, oddly enough, from that time forward, I have never changed a word of them, which is one of the reasons I was willing to put them in this publication. There is a purity and a clarity because it came out of so much pain. And that process allowed me to move through it. You know, I still had issues. We all have issues, but I really have kind of made my peace with my parents, and I'm sorry they're gone. They were lovely, smart, educated people, and they loved books, and they loved detective fiction, so you know they were good people. But they just weren't very good parents, and so from the age of 5 on, I literally raised myself. And I didn't live in an atmosphere of malevolence at all. It was just neglect. But we lived in a neighborhood with 12 kids, and we played all day long. We played, kick the can and dodgeball, and we invented stories, and we were just, it was an amazing way to grow your imagination. Like I tell people, when I was in 12, what my friend and I thought was really fun was to go to the Cherokee Park, 104 acres, and bake potatoes. Now, tell a kid, you know, Mom, I'm bored. Well, honey, why don't you go bake a potato? That's not going to fly. But we pretended to be poor. That's what we used to do. We used to open this can of green beans and go in her garage and pretend we were poor people. And it was pathetic. We just felt so sorry for ourselves. But it was a wonderful way to grow up, you know. It was full of hideouts and Indian princesses and just amazing dramas. So that was good, you know, being outside, being free. I had more freedom than kids should have today. We live in very dangerous times, and I don't think it's okay now to let a kid do things I did. But I survived, and that's a good thing.
I remember I used to ride my bike all over the suburbs of Chicago when I was like 9 and 10 years old, and nobody gave it any thought at all. We even had forest preserves, you know, with dark woods and water and everything,
good.
and nobody gave it any thought. We walked home from school for lunch because there was no such thing as a school cafeteria, and in Chicago, it took the teachers so long to put us all in snowsuits, get us all back out of them again today, that our actual school day was relatively brief. You were in, if I can say this right, Louisville,
Kentucky.
Louisville.
And please remember, I went to grade school with Hunter Thompson, and he was scary even then. When he was in the 6th grade and I was in the 3rd grade, he would hang out at O.D. Forbes drugstore in this kind of cracked bomber jacket, smoking cigarettes. I swear that's my concept of him. And he had 2 cousins, X and B Thompson, and they would ride their bicycles up my shoes, you know, giving me a flat tire. I was scared to death of those guys. You know, they were real. See, so even then, crime. I was already attracted to it, as frightening as it was.
Well, I can top that. I went to high school with Ann Margaret. We were the same age, but I was a year in front of her, and she was so poor. Her parents, this is my mother's story. I will share this with you because this was my mother, and I had issues, as all daughters and mothers do. But one of my mother's deals was that I wasn't allowed to share my clothes. She, you know, I think part of it was that Depression era thing or something, but you know, she didn't approve of my swapping clothes with other people.
Well,
that was
cooties,
a really big deal.
remember cooties? You could get cooties from kids.
And in those days, you know, girls had formal dresses for like the prom and so forth. They had this beautiful pink net formal with spangles on it and stuff. Well, anyway, Annie and I were both singing in the senior girls ensemble. I'm a senior and she's a junior. And we were doing a Christmas concert, and we did those in robes, so clothes didn't come into it. But looking ahead to the spring concert, I said to her, you know, this is so much fun because we were going to go off and sing for some other group and all. And she said to me, I can't go. And I hadn't encountered poor before. So I said to her, why not? And she said, because I don't have anything I can wear. So there I was on the crux of a dilemma. So I went home and crept up into the attic in our large suburban house and smuggled my pink knit formal with the spangles out of it when my mother wasn't home and off to high school. And I gave it to Annie and I said, you know, you can wear this dress and it'll be wonderful. And as luck would have it, you know, fate is truly malignant. About 5 days later, the neighbor down the way came over and I came home from high school thinking I'd gotten away with this. And my mother said, Aunt Lee would like to see your beautiful pink net formal with the spangles. And I thought, shit, what am I going to do? So in the end, I had to confess that I had smuggled it out of the attic and loaned it to a classmate. And my mother, who was fairly small, grew to about 8 feet tall, and said, we will go and retrieve it because you know you cannot do that. So I said, but Mom, it was really in a good cause, and she didn't care about that. So we got in the car, and we drove down to Wilmette from Winnetka, and I had the address, and we got to the big house, but that wasn't the address, and so we went into the alley, and there was the address on the garage, and there was a little apartment above the garage. And I said to my mother, I think that her mother works in the big house because she only has 3 things she can wear to school. She has 3 blouses and 2 skirts. That's it. My mother looked solemn. So we got out of the car, and we went over and knocked on the door, and we climbed up the steps. And the door opens on Annie and her mother, who's Norwegian and doesn't speak a lot of English. And as I nerved myself to say, I've come for my pink spangly formal because my bitch of a mother won't let you wear it. My mother, surprising the hell out of me, stepped forward, reached into her purse, and pulled out a string of pearls. And she said, we were just driving by, she said, and I thought that maybe Annie would like to wear this string of pearls with Barbara's dress.
Yay. That's sweet.
Wasn't that?
That
It was really fabulous. So Annie came and wore her formal. And then we all went out to Algower's, which was a mob-run restaurant in Chicago. But that's where we all went for dinner between the 2 concerts. And I spent the entire time trying to figure out what I could order for like $2.95 because Annie wanted to pay me back by buying me dinner.
very sweet.
And I already knew she couldn't afford it. So I remember sitting there for the first time in my whole spoiled life and looking at the menu and thinking, what can I order that won't insult her, but at the same time, you know, won't break the bank? It was really, you know, one of those deals. I should have written it down years ago, but I did not. So there you are. Your mom's issues, however, got more severe when, after a while, she perhaps drank.
Yes, yes. And my parents were raised in China. They were the children of Presbyterian missionaries. So they were raised in a very, not repressive, but straight-laced era. And when they came over here to go to college, I think they ran into the demon room, and it was like, hello, Mom, hello, Dad, you know, here we go. And my mother was 4 feet 11. She weighed 98 pounds, so she could hardly drink without the effects. And it was their ruin, you know. But in those days, there wasn't a lot of help. I think AA came into existence in, what, in 1948, maybe.
Friends of Bill W.?
Yes. But I don't know that I guess Antabuse came into, that was 1965, I think. So they just muddled along and did a damn poor job of it. But that's what I grew up with, and that's why I wrote it in stories. Truly, those are a purer form of the experience.
Well, I think there's a lot of self-medication or escape. You know, sometimes people are not really alcoholics when they drink. There's other stuff going on. I was telling Sue, I remember some years before, my father loved to drink. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he was a really big guy, and he loved to drink. And I remember saying to his doctor when he had a medical incident, maybe Daddy drinks too much. And he said, no, he said, lots of older gentlemen just don't feel well, so they drink. You know, not, I mean, it's a form. I mean, you can't, like, what, take opium all the, you know, whatever it is, and, you know, not to worry about it. And
Well, and part of it was when World War II ended. Those guys came home. This country was in a prolonged state of celebration. They drank, they smoked cigarettes. It was one long party. And I think that was the ruin of a lot of people. But I think it came out of a kind of joy at being alive. I don't think anybody understood how you could get caught up in that cycle. But I remember some of the parties when my papa came home from war, and it was just amazing. It was great fun.
it was fun. Do you remember have you watched Mad Men? Doesn't it, have you noticed how they're forever? Or you watch old
Smoking,
movies
yeah.
and everybody's smoking all the time and you kind of go, oh,
I know.
but that was just a normal,
I know, absolutely.
normal thing to do. Anyway, I hope that you all will really enjoy both sets of stories, and it will be a nice bridge while we're waiting for W. So we're open for questions if any of you would like to ask any.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, I think.
Time for a new author photo.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes. And I know just what you're going to ask me, because the sister says you.
Was at Disneyland and on his birthday, and he couldn't see what he said he saw.
Yeah, because he remembered the incident correctly, he missed it by a week. He attached it to his birthday when in fact it had happened the week before. I should have just written a little codicil to that one, because everybody's going, oh, wait a minute, I thought Diana's, so that's the explanation.
They buried the little girl at that time, and then they changed it to a dog.
Yes, see? Yay! Yay, good for you.
Could you call on Will? He has some questions
Oh,
for people
yes.
watching.
I can do it. She asked in U.S. for Undertow about Michael Sutton's recollection of the burial of what he believed later in his life was a kidnapped victim. And in the course of the story, his sister steps forward, because they're very hostile toward him, and presents very concrete and quite correct evidence that he could not have done that. In fact, he did see what he thought he saw. It was just a week off. So that's the answer to that. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the W for?
Well, I'm not telling yet because I'm hoping fewer than 100 pages to go. And I believe I know the title, but I have changed my mind on many occasions, and so
Well, no, so you don't have the title in mind when you're writing
she's asking if I have the title in mind when I begin a book, which is sometimes the case. If you call a book Alibi, I guess we better have an alibi in it. And so some of the titles I knew from the beginning. A was always for alibi, B is for burglar, C is for corpse. D is always for deadbeat. I got to E, and I thought E was forever. And I thought it was such a clever play on words. And so I'm sitting down to write E is forever, and Shadow says, but what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know. I thought you knew. So I thought that it was just not going to work. So I changed it to evidence. And the word evidence had a story attached to it. When I got to F, I thought F was for forgery. But I started doing the research, and it was such a boring crime. It is really, I mean, imagine at the end of that book somebody forging a signature. So I thought, now what I'm going to do? So I came up with the word fugitive. And again, the word fugitive has a story buried in it. When I got to K, I thought K was for kidnap. And I devoted 4 chapters, hundreds of pages of notes. And this little voice popped up, God bless her, and said, sweetheart, Susie, kidnap is a federal crime. The FBI is never going to ask Kinsey Milhone to help them solve their problem. So, meanwhile, the clock was ticking. In those days, I did a book a year. So I could hear the, and I thought, man, I had to dump everything and start again. So I thought, I'm going to call it K is for Killer, because surely that will apply to any story I come up with. So that's how that ties. So sometimes I know and sometimes I do not. Yes, ma'am. Yes, and thankfully I have readers. Repeat the question. She's asking about my writing about the 80s and asking if I have ever tripped up. And I was about to say that yes, I have. But fortunately, I have readers who will send me hundreds of letters correcting every tiny little error. It's like in K is for Killer, I describe a citrus tree dropping its leaves. Well, that was not right. So, I have to repent every time I write a book. But I do goof occasionally. And here's how it happened. If I know I don't know something, I go look it up. Or make a phone call, or I read a textbook, or I go ask somebody. Where I err is when I don't realize I don't know it. So I once confused sodium vapor lights, street lights, with mercury vapor. Well, I got a letter from somebody who explained it, and I still don't know the difference. But if I ever mention either of those things again, I'm going to go look it up.
Don't you do at least one book? You did some role playing. Don't I remember you actually tried being a maid for whichever book it is where Kinsey's undercover as a maid?
No, that's how I earned a living. You have to remember this. Before I even got into writing of any sort and made my first $1,500, I worked in the medical field. I worked front office for a GP, and I worked as a hospital admissions clerk. I did cashiering. I worked as a medical education secretary. Little white uniform, little white shoes. I was very cute. And I also, before that, earned a living as working as a maid. There's a bookstore in Santa Barbara called Tecolote. I worked for the woman who owned it, and she changed her sheets every day. Every day I had to change her sheets, and they didn't have the elastic around. I thought that was kind of perverse, I thought, what is she doing on those sheets that requires, I didn't look too closely, but anyway. So I scrubbed toilet bowls. If you're divorced and you have little kids, I don't care, you do what you have to do. So when it came time, and that was, I think, Ellis for Lawless, where she goes, oh, that was a good book. I got to go to the Hyatt in Dallas, Fort Worth, and they showed me the whole back of the hotel, how all that stuff works. So that was great fun. And that's when Kinsey starts vacuuming the floor, and she had a good time. Yes. Oh, hello. Oh. There is a group called Friends of Sue Grafton. It's a secret society, so don't tell anyone. And they are all apparently, John is one of them. Is Cher here? Oh. And I will tell you this, and I hope there's no hideous consequence. We do have a conference every other year called Grafton, like this year is G13. We did G7, G9, G11, and we're meeting at Avila Beach. There are as many as 35 of us, and we just get together, and I read the first chapter of the book that's coming out, and we just play. So if you really get serious about Friends of Sue Grafton, you can ask John and make your way to, we just have a good time. Yes? Her question is, how many copies of A is for Alibi were printed? versus what's coming out today. A is for Alibi. I think there were 6,500 copies, which is why they're worth so much today. If you have a signed first edition of A is for Alibi, it's $6,800. So now, like a print run will be $660,000. So that's, you know, those early ones are very valuable. Yes? She's asking two questions. One, I think you mean Santa Teresa. You said Santa Maria. I stole that from Ross McDonald because he lived in Santa Barbara and he wrote about Santa Barbara. And when it came time to name the town, I fictionalized the name of it so that I won't get sued. Plain and simple. And that way, I'm the goddess of Santa Teresa. I can move real estate. I can change the weather. I am responsible for all homicides in Santa Teresa. I also make sure justice is served. So I'm very powerful. I didn't know if you're aware of that. Her second question had to do with the writing process and whether at the outside of a set of a book, I know where I'm going. The answer is not a clue. I will start usually with an idea, much like a short story, only something more substantial. And sometimes I have a sense of where I need to go. But there's a different story and plot are two entirely different critters. Story is what happens. Plot is how it happens, that sequence of events. And those, often I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I do consider a mystery novel a highly organized form. It is very carefully structured. And in the writing I'm doing on W, I'm working the whole board at the same time. So I'm currently writing chapter 30. It took me 4 weeks to write chapter 28 because it connected to other things. And every time I correct it here, I had to go back and make sure everything added up. So I wish I were smarter, and I wish I were better organized about storytelling, but I'm not. You know, my fantasy is that other writers, they just sit down and whip it out. You know, they have a good time and drink or smoke cigarettes. What do they do, you know? And I so resent that. I want them to suffer as I do, you know? Yes? Yes. Oh, I can't hear. Yes, she is asking about the timeline for the next 4 books. W comes out. See, I was clever. I didn't tell you what it was. W will come out in the fall of 2013, X 2015, Y 2017, and Z in 2019. God willing. You know, that is my intention.
And our plan is to both be here when it happens.
Yes,
so root for us, both of us.
Yes.
Are you still sending out Christmas cards? She can get
Yeah. Oh, she's asking if you want to be on my mailing list, which is generally kept to 5,000 names. I will. If you're on my mailing list, you get your very own Kinsey Milhone Christmas card. And when a new book comes out, I send little presents out. I mean, and they're really cool because that's the most fun I have. Because nobody criticizes, you know. If you write a book, they criticize you. You send somebody a little present, they don't. So, like for L is for Lawless, there were these wonderful little luggage tags. I was sent out. For Q is for Quarry, it was a little mood, you know, those cards you put your thumb on. P is for Peril, it was a little tiny kit, first aid kit. T is for what was that? T is for trespass. A tea bag. With my
That's
picture
because we really wanted her to call T. T is for Lipton. And she wouldn't do it, but she did arrive for her event with this ginormous package of tea bags.
That's right.
I laughed so hard.
So if you want to get on my mailing list, write your name, your snail mail address. I do not email. Snail mail, you have to spend 45 cents, and postage is going up next week, so be quick about it. I will put you on the list, and then you'll just, every year I do a fresh picture of myself because I feel you're entitled to know how I'm holding up. So, and nothing is airbrushed. Sometimes we tamper with the light. You know, I'm not above being in a flattering light. But anyway, honestly, it's fun. You can give it to me in my hand. And you just have to hope that I can get it all the way home to the gal. I want to tell you, I do not have a staff. People picture me with the staff. I wish I had a staff. I have a gal who makes post office runs maybe once a week. I couldn't bear to have somebody in my house. You know, I'm an introvert and I don't want the interruptions, but she will make post office runs, but I don't have her pick up my cleaning. I mean, I'm not that spoiled. So anyway, so I will pass all the information to her. She will put you on the magic list. And I want you to know, I pay for those Christmas cards. I pay for those little gifts I send you because then I get control. See, if my publisher did it, they would want to vote. Ooh, they don't get to vote. I get to do anything I want. So
That's really independent of you. Will has a question from
Yes,
somebody watching.
Oh, this is a question about Henry Pitt, who is totally invented, but we are all in love with him. So husbands, please be careful. He is 88. My big problem with Henry is to keep him from being too perfect. So that often he's cranky because I just can't. He's just so amazing. He's got those cute legs, and but here, I can assure you, Henry will survive to the end of the alphabet, as will all the siblings. And because I've said before, Henry's sister Nell is only 99 years old, and she's not even sick. So why would she die? The older people I know are kick butt. You know, it's like some people are old when they're 52. I am going to live to 108 unless I, lose, as long as I can eat and drink, and that's all I need. Read.
Right. Maybe we have time for one more question. Okay. There was a lady there with a black, whatever. There, you, right.
I have said, and she's asking about my retirement years. Can't wait. Because I want to take drawing lessons. I am to drawing what many people are to writing. I love to draw, and I can't do it. And when I draw, the little voice in my head says, "Yeah, this is just disgusting. This is terrible. That doesn't look anything." But here's what I've learned from drawing that helps me with the work. When you draw, I use pen and ink. Because, if you sketch, if you use a pencil, you can just approximate a line. The rule with drawing is you commit to the line. If you're going to draw a line, you commit to the line. And that's what I do with these books. At a certain point, I'm always afraid, I'm always ready to abandon a book. Then I think to myself, wait a minute, I committed to this line, and this is the line I will follow. So I'm sure there are many other lessons I can learn from drawing. Drawing is just a magic process. And I could take lessons now, but that's so scary, I would fail. Oof.
Might stifle shadow. That would be really scary. Lee, what number range are we talking about? We ran out? What did we run out at? 100 and what? 24? Okay, right. So we're going to give away a book to reward people for coming. And I picked this one especially for Sue. This is a novel called Parlor Games about May Dugas, who cons her way across continents It opens in 1917 as our cunning protagonist is standing trial for extortion, but the reason I picked it is that she is called at this time the most dangerous woman in America. That's you, kid. So it's called Parlor Games. It's actually out now this month, but this is an advanced reading copy. So I'm going to ask Sue to pick any number between 1 and 124.
24.
24. Is anybody with number 24 in the room? Sorry? She left. Well, then she lost. Okay, we got to pick another number. You have to be here to win.
4, the number 4.
Number 4?
I love 4s.
You're right here? Okay. If you will see, I'll give the book to Lee up there at the front counter. You can claim it. Ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
The truth is that you're really the most important people in the room, because Sue wouldn't have flown over here from Santa Barbara and I wouldn't have driven down had you not planned to be here. So I really thank you. Again, I repeat to you, please keep an eye on our website or sign up for our e-news, which you can do on our website, so that you will know when Sue is going to return. Now, your books are pre-signed. Any of you, please don't get up except those people who want to take their book and go home. That's our first deal. If you don't want to stand in line and you have your book, if you would exit the store while the rest of you stay seated, that would be a really good thing. This is going to take a few minutes. Yeah. That would also include numbers 1 through 30 who got their books signed, so you can. Thank you. I'm going to be 108 too. Actually, Mayo Clinic has told me that. That is my life.
And see, I just hit 70 last month, and both my parents died in their 70s. So I am pushing and exercising and eating right now. But I'm gonna go home and have some beer.
I don't take super good care of myself, that's for sure. All right, second, with numbers 31 through 40, make your way to the front of the store if you want to get your, well, here you are. If you want to get your book personalized by Sue. You can do that too if you're number 1. And with the rest of you, just stay seated again for a few minutes because there are too many people here. Will, can you get John Nato to come over and pick up chairs?